Chapter 15. Old Granny Tells Her Tale.
"It was 1529, Old Granny began, and it was totally rubbish. There was no TV, no rap music, no nothing. The king was a skinny old hunchback with no teeth. The queen was an ant, and there was nothing to eat in the entire kingdom except for one enormous apple surrounded by the royal guards. I tell you, the olden days were a total waste of time."
"I'm sick of it,"
said Nicholas de Twinklecakes one Wednesday morning, just after a delicious breakfast of nothing at all.
"I haven't eaten for about a year and I'm starting to get hungry. I'm going to build a windmill, and then we can make loaves of bread."
"Hurrah!" said his wife and son. "Hurrah, hurrah, hurrah!" "So Nicholas worked hard to build his windmill," continued Old Granny. "He already had 3p, which made him the richest man in Lamonic Bibber at that time. Plus he found 2p under a piece of dirt and another 1p inside a dead peasant. That gave him 6p, more than enough to build a mighty windmill in those days. So he set to building, and very soon it was done. There the windmill stood, on the banks of the Lamonic River, its heavy wooden sails turning just as fine can be. And sure enough, Nicholas and his family were soon feasting on loaves of bread every day. "Hurrah!" said his wife and son. "Hurrah, hurrah, hurrah!" But the hurrahs didn't last long, young'un. It was Midsummer's Eve when a fierce storm came a-calling, and just at that moment, Nicholas's wife and son were standing under the windmill, singing a song called "Hurrah, hurrah, hurrah, hurrah." They had just reached the chorus when, fizz, fizz, ouch! They were struck by lightning. When Nicholas returned later that night, he found them both dead. And what's more, the windmill was broken, for the storm had destroyed the machinery that made the sails go round. "Then a dark look did come over Nicholas's face," said Old Granny, taking a long sip of sherry. "A dark look, even darker than the thunderous skies above, and as Nicholas knelt there by the fireside with an earthworm licking his shoe, he shouted,
'I hate everything now. I've gone all bad and I'm going to destroy Lamonic Bibber with a huge cannon. No, wait, I've just had a better idea. I'm going to destroy it with power crystals instead. And the power crystals will make the sails of the windmill turn once more, but this time the windmill will not make loaves of bread. No, it will make pure evil.'"
And then Nicholas de Twinklecakes uttered his famous curse.
"When next the windmill sails do turn, Lamonic Bibber will burn and burn."
"But, Old Granny, why would he want to burn down the whole town into cinders and ash?" asked Polly. "It doesn't make no senses." "It was grief for his dead wife and son," said Old Granny, gently rocking back and forth in her chair and farting all the while. Luckily, the creaking of the chair covered the noise, and they didn't smell too much, so she just about got away with it. "Yes, Nicholas's grief rose up inside his heart and drove him mad," she continued sadly. "And in his madness he blamed the whole town for what had happened to his family. And so for the next 30 years no one saw Nicholas de Twinklecakes. Up there in his windmill he sat, all alone like a piece of old cheese that no one wants to dance with. His hair grew long and his face grew bitter, and his arms sort of stayed about the same, but never mind. He was busy with his experiments, strange, unnatural experiments involving power and crystals, and eventually, after 30 years of toil, struggle, and hardly combing his hair, he had finally done it. The year was 1559. "Just like what was written on the bag Jake found," whispered Polly in the flickering firelight. "It was 1559, continued Old Granny, and it was Midsummer's Eve once more.
Ha ha!
Crowed Nicholas from high up in his windmill.
I have finally made some power crystals, and now to do that curse I mentioned earlier about 30 years ago.
Giggling madly, he ripped up a couple of floorboards and made them into a power crystal control panel.
Aha!
Cried Nicholas.
Now to put the crystals into the control panel, and it's burning time.
But at that moment there came a shout from below, and peering down, Nicholas saw the townsfolk gathered around the windmill, brandishing flaming torches and chickens.
We know what you're up to,
shouted the townsfolk.
We're going to get you, Nicholas the Twinklecakes. Oh no,
cried Nicholas.
I haven't got time to put the power crystals in the control panel. I'd better run away.
So Nicholas climbed out the back window and away he ran, over the fields and meadows, stopping only to bury the power crystals deep in the ground. Maybe he thought he'd get another chance to use them some other time, but it was not to be. 3 days later he was found in a ditch, dead as a cattle and completely bald. He had been murdered by hare thieves. And that's how I heard the tale, as it has passed down from generation to generation,
finished old Granny.
To be honest, I made up the bit about the enormous apple, but the rest of it is probably true. And I tell you, young'un, ever since that time, the windmill sails have never once turned, not even in the strongest winds.